Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
A British neo-Nazi group has been labelled a terror organisation and outlawed from the UK in a landmark first for the country. National Action, the self-styled nationalist youth movement, previously praised Thomas Mair, the white supremacist who murdered Labour MP Joe Cox. Well, today, Home Secretary Amber Rudd made membership of the group a criminal offence, saying it promotes a vile ideology which she's not prepared to stand for. Well, Sky's senior correspondent Ian Woods is here with me. So this is a first in the UK. What does it mean, Ian?
Well, it means that the pictures that we will show you now of a National Action rally wouldn't be allowed to happen because demonstrating in support of a prescribed organisation, carrying flags and banners, promoting that organisation, those are all banned under this anti-terrorism legislation. Now, why do it? Well, there's been suggestions that a double standard was in place because if there were marches like this by Islamist groups and there were the kind of comments which have been made by National Action by Islamists, then they would be prosecuted under anti-terrorism legislation. Thomas Mair was prosecuted with a criminal offence. Now, there was no evidence that he was directly linked to National Action, though National Action did praise what he did in murdering Joe Cox, and the government considered bringing in this ban ahead of the murder trial last month, but worried that it might influence matters. So they delayed it until the trial was over. This is what the Home Secretary Amber Rudd had to say about the ban.
National Action is a vile group. They promote homophobia, they promote violence and terrorism, and they have no place in this country. That's why I'm taking this action today. Well, this will very clearly make membership and glorification of National Action a criminal offence. This will give the police and the courts extra powers to go after people who are those members.
Ian, is there any direct evidence of links to criminal activities?
There is. I mean, not in the Thomas Mair case, but if you go back to last year, there was an example of someone in North Wales who attacked, in a racist attack, a Sikh dentist, tried to behead him in a Tesco supermarket. Zach Davis was prosecuted. There was no evidence of a direct link to National Action, but National Action literature was found in his house. And similarly, last week, someone was prosecuted of racial harassment against Luciana Berger, the Labour MP. Joshua Bonehill Payne was his name. He was jailed for that offence. Again, he has been linked to the National Action organisation. So we put it to Luciana Berger. Is it possible to still maintain free speech in this country, which we're rightly proud of, while at the same time taking action against an organisation like National Action?
Well, there's a very clear line in this country about where free speech crosses that line into hate speech. And we have a responsibility to ensure that people live free from fear of attack, be that online or offline. They should be dealt with in exactly the same way. And unfortunately, we know that there are cases where what happens online trickles over into what happens in real life in terms of physical attacks.
So this ban is likely to come into action this week. It does give police more powers. There was an example earlier this year of a National Action rally which took place in Blackpool, where one of the speakers there made comments which were deemed offensive enough by the Jewish community for them to complain to Lancashire Police. They put together a file, sent it to the Crown Prosecution Service. No action so far has been taken. This gives them a bit more room for manoeuvre.
Indeed. Ian Woods, thank you.
Tonight we look at the rise of the so-called alt-right across Europe. They call themselves Identitarians, groups that are unafraid to talk about the need for national borders and cultural difference, who fear Islamisation in their countries and call for immigrants to be returned home. They are patriots, wary of being seen as fascist, and reject the idea that this is a return to the Europe of the 1930s. So this evening we ask how we should view the rise of the new right on our doorstep. Is it a fringe uprising, or is it the beginning of the end of Europe's liberal democracies? This is the first in our series of films this week, asking if populism is fomenting a revolution. Gabriel Gatehouse starts us off in Vienna.
What on earth is going on in Europe? governments falling to populist revolts, old certainties crumbling at a dizzying pace. A union based on half a century of stability is metamorphosing, but into what? This has been a year of centrifugal forces, of mainstream politics moving towards the fringes, and of fringe groups battling to lay claim to a new centre. We've come to Vienna, once the capital of a great empire. Today, Austria is on the periphery of world events, but we're here to meet some people who want to make Austria great again. They call themselves die Identitäre Bewegung, or the Identitarian movement. And they hold views which many would consider beyond the boundaries of the acceptable.
I would really ask you not to film the way there.
You don't want us to film the way in?
Yeah,
okay, so we'll switch off.
I'm sorry, but
for a little bit.
I'll tell him when he can start to film.
Okay, fine, we'll switch off for now.
I'm sorry, yeah. So.
No problem.
You
up here. But the parameters of public discourse are shifting. Can we film from here, or? This is a group that's in the process of coming out of the shadows.
Yeah. Fortunately, we have now some young members who are very affiliated with the media, cutting videos, internet, and so on.
Yeah.
At the moment, we're even on the way to develop an app.
Right. Seriously.
Yeah. It's an app for patriots where you can find the other guys who also have this app, you know?
Right. Like a sort of dating app. But,
yeah, like a Tinder for patriots. Yeah.
Tinder for patriots.
No, but it's really something that happens.
The Identitarians are, in some ways, different from the traditional far right.
I think it will not
they disavow violence, they're articulate and tech-savvy. They've got their own TV studio here.
Markus, alles klar haben.
They broadcast live with fellow travellers in other European countries and put together videos of their publicity stunts. Earlier this month, they scaled a statue of the Habsburg Empress Maria Theresa and dressed her up in a giant burqa. No prizes then for guessing their views on Islam and immigration.
That those people who came here illegally, yeah, now during this, especially during the refugee crisis, they need to be sent back home. That's very important because. But they can't be sent back home. You'd be sending them into a war zone. No. A lot of them didn't come from Syria to begin with, and for the others, I think we should create zones and areas around Europe. Like,
you know, that's got like really scary overturns, especially in this part of the world.
Then you have to
put zones and areas where you put people that has. There's another word for that.
I think
no. Safe zones. And it's an official plan of the United Nations also to create a safe zone.
That you automatically made this association is also showing part of the problem, because a lot of Europeans, you know, have conditioned in a way when they hear some words like people, like culture, like border, you know, like identity, or being proud of oneself, immediately kind of an ethnomasochistic reflex kicks in, yeah, and creates this Nazi reflex, you know, and people are really fed up with that. Yeah.
We left their TV studio and moved on to a local cafe. If they're not Nazis, I wondered, then what are they? I ran them through a checklist of typical far-right issues. How do you feel about people from different ethnic backgrounds marrying, having children?
Their choice.
Their choice. You're cool with it. You're cool with it. How do you feel about gay people?
Also their choice.
Their choice. Yes. Have you got gay friends?
Not that I know of.
Not that you would know of. Right. Do you think that's odd that you don't have any gay friends?
I don't have any.
But do you think it's odd in that you don't have any?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, fine. What about Jews?
Yeah. No problem.
You don't think Jews are running the world in a secret conspiracy?
No. Ironically, it's the Jews that are most worried about Islamization of Europe right now. We have a huge exodus from France, for instance. Jews are fleeing Europe because of Islamization.
And so the conversation turns back to Muslim immigration. Islamophobia is the new anti-Semitism, and the Identitarians see themselves as part of a broader cultural insurgency.
We are a European movement. We exist in France, we exist in Germany, Austria, Italy, we exist in Slovenia, we exist in the Czech Republic. And we are overcoming old-style nationalism, chauvinistic nationalism, which are attacking other European countries. We think we have a European culture, and today, in the 21st century, we need to stick together.
And we want a Europe that maintains the national differences, that secures our borders, that is strong in the outside, but soft and pluralistic in the inside. And this union is is exactly the opposite.
Would you like Austria to leave the European Union?
I don't think that at the moment we need to talk about it, because Austria is getting strong. Brexit was a huge wake-up call. In France we have patriotic change, we have the Visegrad states. I think we can take over this whole system and turn it into a real Europe.
You think you can take it over?
I think we can, and we will.
Time for a reality check. Austria's identitarian movement has only a few hundred activists. In last week's presidential election, voters rejected the candidate from the far-right Freedom Party, albeit by a narrow margin. But it's not just Austria. Across Europe, right-wing populist parties are challenging the old duopoly of the centre-right and the centre-left. Nowhere is that challenge more stark than in France, where the ideas of the identitarian movement are supported by a growing number of influential public intellectuals.
Well, I'm on my way now to meet one of these people who provides the intellectual underpinnings for the identitarians here in France. He's a man who was once a senior advisor to former President Nicolas Sarkozy.
Patrick Buisson sees the old European order facing a revolt by a younger generation who are beginning to reject the whole post-war Western consensus.
Cette génération a vu à travers le libéralisme pas simplement sa dimension économique, mais sa dimension culturelle, et a pensé que le libéralisme était insécable, indissociable, qu'il y avait une unité philosophique du libéralisme, qu'on ne pouvait pas séparer le libéralisme économique du libéralisme sociétal et culturel.
And in this worldview, Brexit was a tipping point.
Vous ne pouvez pas imaginer ce qu'a décidé le peuple britannique au mois de juin peut avoir d'importance pour les continentaux comme nous, Français, puisque c'est la démonstration que le peuple redevient, à travers le vote du Brexit, un sujet politique, c'est-à-dire capable de décider de son destin là où on veut décider de son destin à sa place.
Scarred by recent terrorist attacks, France is increasingly preoccupied by the existential question of what it means to be French. In Lyon, as in other cities, people are leading increasingly segregated lives. And as the dream of multiculturalism loses its shine, the politics of identity is gaining ground.
Vieille Europe, n'entends-tu pas l'appel de tes frères?
Génération Identitaire have their headquarters in a bar down one of the city's medieval side streets. They call themselves not activists, but militants, and claim to have 2,000 fee-paying members in more than a dozen cities across France. Twice a week, they fan out across the city, distributing hot soup and winter clothes to the homeless, or to the European homeless, as they put it.
La réalité, ce qu'on remarque, c'est que ceux qui dorment dans la rue aujourd'hui, ce sont des Européens, parce que les pouvoirs publics, les politiques ont décidé d'aider les autres, les migrants, notamment les clandestins, et eux ont le droit à une structure d'accueil, ont le droit à la nourriture, ont le droit à tout un tas de choses, et ceux qui dorment dans la rue, ce qu'on constate, c'est que ce sont des Européens.
Mais vous ne refusez pas aider des...
Si on croise quelqu'un dans le besoin qui nous demande quelque chose de chaud, on lui donnera. Mais voilà, comme je vous le dis, nous on a fait un choix, c'est d'aider les nôtres avant les autres.
In the summers, they organize youth camps where they train and exchange ideas with other like-minded people from across Europe, including Martin Sellner, the Austrian we met earlier. Génération Identitaire are not directly affiliated with any political party, but they are emboldened by the prospect of a Le Pen presidency, and their rejection of multiculturalism goes further than a proposal to simply limit immigration. What they're proposing is, in effect, ethnic cleansing.
Aujourd'hui, ce qu'on remarque, c'est que plus on avance dans les générations et de moins en moins celles-ci sont intégrées en fait. C'est-à-dire que vous avez des jeunes extra-européens qui sont là depuis 2-3 générations et qui ne se sentent pas français, qui crachent sur la France.
In your vision of
Eh ben,
France,
s'ils ne se sentent pas français, on fera en sorte de leur donner la possibilité d'aller dans un pays dont ils se sentent un peu plus investis.
they're French. They're as French as you are. They were born here.
Oui, ce sont des Français de papier, ce qu'on appelle un Français de papier. C'est pas un Français de culture, c'est pas un Français qui a la même mode de vie, c'est un citoyen, il a une carte d'identité. À ce titre-là, ça n'en fait pas un Français de façon concrète. Et si lui-même crache sur la France, si lui-même crache sur l'Europe, si lui-même commet des délits, c'est qu'il n'a pas envie d'être là, on lui propose tout simplement d'être ailleurs.
Again, perspective. The more extreme views of the Identitarians are not echoed, officially at least, even by the kaleidoscope of far-right parties now vying for the centre ground in France, the Netherlands and Belgium, in Italy, Germany and Austria. Martin Sellner and his friends are a small minority. But the thing is, they know that.
In fact, we see ourselves in patriotic avant-garde who is pushing the envelopes, the Overton window of what you can say and what you can think.
Little by little, these ideas are being fed into the political bloodstream. Not new ideas, but old ones. Ideas that many thought had been consigned to history.
Gabriel Gatehouse there. Well, joining us now from Hungary, Frank Furedi. And here in the studio, Julia Ebner. Very nice to have you both. And you heard how Gabriel ended that piece. These are not new ideas, but old ones. When you see this movement, Julia, do you think this is something new or something that you've seen before?
Well, it's definitely a renaissance of some form, but I think there is a clear new dimension to it, and that is that increasingly we see younger generations, we see educated people across all classes, across all social backgrounds, joining far-right movements, both populist movements and the more militant ones. And I think what we're seeing is effectively a full-blown far-right renaissance across Europe or across the world.
And when you say far-right and you talk about populism, is that something that scares you?
Definitely, because I do see a clear connection between the populist far-right spreading hateful ideologies and the more militant far-right. And increasingly attacks are happening all across Europe. Far-right terrorism is becoming a bigger threat at the moment than jihadist terrorism. And we've seen attacks, across the entire continent.
Frank Furedi, do you feel that's overblown?
I think it's sort of a kind of hysterical reaction of the where we continue to talk about it's just like Hitler, it's just like 1930s, and we're confusing a small number of young right-wing activists with the broader populist impulse that's enveloping Europe, which has got some positive aspects and some negative aspects. And I think there's a danger that we simply pathologize everything that is unusual and everything that questions establishment. And the people in the package that I just saw now are in many respects the mirror image of the identity.
Frank, forgive us, we're going to try and sort out your line. We've got terrible sound problems there, but let me put some of what we've gleaned from that to Julia. Identitarians, or however you want to call them, complain that they've been forced to accept an erosion of their culture, laws, national boundaries, and that when you call this extreme or sort of scary populism or far-right, you prove their point. You take things that this, liberal society has decreed taboo, and you don't let anyone express their fears about it.
Well, the problem about this taboo becoming of expressing anti-Muslim resentments, for example, becoming more of a legitimate dinner table discussion is that effectively it has fed into both militant far-right movements, but also into exactly the narratives that Islamist extremists are spreading. One that the West is at war with Islam. And we're seeing this, this cultural war that both Anders Breivik, the Norwegian terrorist who killed 70 people on that island in 2011 and the narratives of al-Baghdadi, we see these narratives turning into a self-fulfilling prophecy, into a global civil war between Muslims and non-Muslims.
But, you know, I'm going to try and go to Frank. Can we go to Frank? I don't know if you can still hear us. The concern is, Frank, that you are missing what is essentially the return of fascism, that this is neo-Nazism by any other name.
Yeah, I think that's a loss of historical imagination. When you think about the 1930s and what fascists represented, and you compare that to kids who are spread all over Europe and who are, in an unconfused way, trying to make sense of that uncertainty, I think there's a real danger of crying wolf. And we're crying wolf a lot of them, not realizing that there is also...
I'm so sorry, we're just not getting a good enough line. I'm going to give you one of Frank Furedi's lines, though. He talked about the promiscuous diagnosis of populism, which, in other words, allows the elite who have been, you know, if you like, guilty of corrupt politicians or undemocratic institutions or sort of badly organised bodies that have had too much power to sort of displace their anxiety by using this sort of, you know, accusation of populism just to make themselves feel better. And there is something in that, isn't there?
Yeah, well, definitely. I think just finger-pointing and scapegoating everyone who voted for the far right in Austria or voted for Brexit is the wrong approach to it. And I do agree that much of this is rooted in a deep disappointment of the establishment not addressing the problems that major, I would say, marginalized majorities are facing.
So is it too late? I mean, how do you see these movements now? And Gabriel joined up the dots for us. He showed us the movements in Vienna, in Paris. But reminding us, it's very small numbers at the moment. Is this a niche interest group or is this the beginning of a revolution, do you think?
I mean, that is the problem we're seeing from online, offline hate crimes, support for the alt-right in the US, support for identity movements in Austria and France, support for pretty much groups on all different levels. We're seeing a sharp rise. And I think this is becoming more and more mainstream, so it's something we need to address. And in fact, I would say that it's like having two sides of the same coin. You have the Islamist extremists on one side and the far right on the other side. And if we don't address both of them, they will both get richer and richer, because for every far right extremist that we get also another potential jihadist. And then it's just a matter of time until we toss the coin.
Do you think there'll be
and
these
we see
groups
either
in
a far
power
right
by the end of the decade? What do you think?
Well, by the end of the day, I mean, I do hope that this cultural war that both extremists and both identity movements on both sides are speaking about is not turning into reality. But right now, I am seriously concerned by the developments both on this side of the Atlantic, but also on what is happening with Trump now.
Julie Revner, thanks for coming in. And our apologies, we couldn't get a clearer line from Budapest there with Frank Furedi.
I've been getting away with it.